mga ka-eksena? Welcome back to my world, Elmer's World, where we vlog about music and subculture in our local scene here in the Philippines, or what we call OPM. October and November might be a more appropriate month to celebrate being an outcast. But what surprises me is celebrating GOTH Day in the 22nd of May, wherein the summer heat is still on the horizon, and the fast approaching National Emo Day on the mid-December. Now this could be our December.
This is my December.
It's a long, lonely December.
It's been a long, lonely December.
A season to give homage to emos and non-emos alike. Speaking of emo itself is an offspring of hardcore punk but had its own unique take on the punk ethos. Rather than being more political and rebellious, emo took the rebelliousness in a more introverted, sad, depressed, and suicidal character. Some may call the genre emotional hardcore in order to identify its connection to the hardcore scene. But emo in itself sounded like a gloomy, more sad boy version of pop punk. Bands like The Promise Ring, Sunny Day Real Estate, Texas is the Reason, American Football are examples of what emo elitists deem as real emo. It is in the mid to late 2000s wherein emo gained the mainstream traction, with the rise of mainstream emo bands like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, Paramore, etc. We can go on and talk a little deeper on emo, but it is not the main focus of this video. What we are focusing on is the OFFSPRING, or the subgenre of emo, which is SKRAMZ, or most popularly known as Screamo. Screamo emerged as a subgenre of emo during the 1990s. With its connection to the hardcore scene, a bunch of bands took on the emotional sound of emo to a more extreme level by adding some elements of hardcore like screaming into it. The idea is in order for emo to be more expressive, it may be a cool thing to add some screaming, and that is how Screamo became a thing. And for the formality of the term, it sometimes can be called post-hardcore. You can definitely hear the hardcore undertones or influences while listening to some Screamo bands, but we can distinguish the differences on the lyrical matter and the overall mood or sounds. Hardcore is more about the aggression and the punk rebellious ethos, sometimes political, while Screamo is more in the sad, depressive, emotional state of being a teenager. Some Screamo bands switches from screaming to some clean, high-pitched singing. Screamo or post-hardcore emphasizes a greater degree of creative expression inspired by post-punk or noise rock. Screamo or post-hardcore can mean so many different things to some people. It is a term applied to a broad constellation of groups. It developed and expanded in cities that established hardcore scenes, with pioneers such as the San Diego bands like Antioch Arrow and Heroin, and bands from the East Coast of US like Orchid, Funeral Diner, Satia, Page 99. Most of these bands stayed true to the DIY ethos of what hardcore is all about. It is when bands like AFI blew up that Screamo began gaining mainstream traction. And that time, Screamo or post-hardcore started to move away from the DIY ethics that traditional hardcore is rooted from. With screaming becoming popular in the mainstream and kids saw AFI gaining popularity by playing Screamo music, a wave of bands with swoopy hair and a charismatic frontman began to rise, and that led to a plethora of kids known as scene kids. The term scene kids is somehow associated to Screamo music in a sense. It is when kids started to care more about that image they are portraying to with outfits that are from Hot Topic. The scene haircut with side fringe, eyeliners, black clothing or striped shirt, and some neon colors for girls. During the MySpace or scene era, what some kids identify as Screamo or post-hardcore and as their influences, and what most of these kids grew up listening to, are bands like From First to Last, Census Fail, Silverstein, Chiodos, Hawthorne Heights, Taking Back Sunday, A Skylit Drive, Under Oath, Seosen. Note that most of these bands had too many fangirls mainly because of the charismatic or attractive frontman. And for most of these bands, it was never about the music, nor the culture, or the ethos for them. Neither of these bands consider bands like At the Drive-In as influences. In fact, what they consider as influences would probably be Linkin Park or Slipknot. The scene/Screamo explosion became more about being famous for most of these bands. It was in the year 2015 when the scene explosion was at its peak. Screamo, post-hardcore or metalcore can be an overlapping term for a number of groups that play breakdowns. Screaming and whiny high-pitched choruses like Asking Alexandria, Bring Me the Horizon, Attack Attack, Sleeping with Sirens, Pierce the Veil. But on 2016 and so on, the scene era slowly declined for some reasons that most of those kids grew out of that phase they were into back then. And some fangirls grew out of their crush on a charismatic frontman. But later on that decade, like nu metal, a Screamo revival is going on. A couple of these bands have gone back to the roots of DIY hardcore and made it alive again. Bands like Knock Loose, Touche Amore, La Dispute, etc. In the Philippines, Typecast blew up in the 2000s, a Filipino emo band that is hugely influenced by Seosin, particularly the translating the name era, with Anthony Green's high-pitched vocals being emulated by Steve Bajola, a frontman with very emotional sounding voice. You can see the 7 years influence on their song Breathe Through the Glass. Typecast also is considered Screamo with some of their songs like The Conflict. Typecast songs hits hard on most of the youngsters back then. Upon listening to their most popular hit, Will You Ever Learn, most of us somehow became a little depressed and felt like cutting our wrists. But some of us considered this band as a way to tell us that we're not alone on this stage of our lives. We can go on a little deeper on this iconic band, but it can be another video on its own. Now before we begin, I would just like to tell you that the bands that we are going to talk about in this video are the top 10 bands that are considered as Screamo. If you know of any Filipino Screamo bands that are not on this list, let me know down in the comments section below. Shout out to all the scene kids, the emos and non-emos alike. Belated Happy National Emo Day. Now without further ado, let's just jump right into the countdown. Number 10 on this list is a MySpace era band that can be comparable to Finch. Never heard from this band for a while, not much of an information about them. Their music somehow feels like an early 2000s take on Screamo, in comparison to Finch. This band has been fronted by JT Flameno, a drummer of a punk band called Boy Elroy. 13 Needles had a song called Cab 1, much of a Finch vibes. You should give it a listen. My mind is a terrible place to live in and I no longer feel at home. The title of their track speaks for itself. This ridiculously long song title suggests that this band is indeed a Screamo band. Still Life is a melodic hardcore band with influences from punk, emo, post-hardcore, based in Quezon City, Philippines. Their vocalist Chris Panaga is featured on one of False Contenders' MVs, a band I've talked about on my previous vlog. Still Life is full of emotions. The aforementioned track is a melancholic Screamo track. They also had a song called Open Wound. Both songs are on a 2-track album called Familiar Roads. Can't wait for this band to release a full-length album. That would be amazing. Coming up at number 8, we got the sadcore / Screamo band from Olongapo, a small town that is somehow a breeding ground for underground metalcore scenes. Here's a little bit of info from scoutmag.ph. The term local music scene in our country isn't limited to Manila-based musicians alone, but not a lot of people know this. Every region in the country houses a different sound in their respective bars and watering holes every night. It can get rowdy real fast or mellow you down when you least expect it. The beauty of these different scenes is how different they are from each other and how indicative they are of the place's subculture. In this piece, we caught up with Maki de la Cruz, who's part of Lungkutan Collective and the vocalist of Pale Paths. Pale Paths is a melodic hardcore band heavily involved in the underground scene of their hometown of Olongapo. They refer to themselves as sadcore. Get ready to hear Screamo vocals combined with double and half-time tempos within their tracks. They're spreading the sound of Olongapo's metalcore throughout their bar tours around the country, from Pampanga to Quezon City. As of now, Pale Paths has 3 tracks, namely Undeserving, Forever, and Dirt.
This is who you wanted to be. This is why you gave life to me. I am the monument. A torn of a bird.
to Lindenwood, not the university in St. Charles, Missouri, but an emotive punk rock band from Manila. They are in the umbrella of punk rock, but they made it on this list because most of their songs are in screaming or shouty vocals. Here's a little info from Bandcamp. Lindenwood is a 4-piece punk rock band hailing from Metro Manila, Philippines. Their sound is described to have that manic and aggressiveness of 90s skate punk with melodic sensibilities of contemporary emo and post-hardcore. Most of their songs on the album Steady Lives, released July 28, 2017, is more on aggressive screaming vocals. The 90s skate punk influence on their sound is very evident. Their Die With Me EP is more of a straight up pop punk sound. You should check out Lindenwood, this band is awesome, link will be on the description. Up next is a Screamo band called TNG Experience or TNG. First time listening to their song Law, I was mind blown by how expressive the emotions can be if it is screamed in Tagalog language. Although I have heard a lot of Tagalog screaming in some other bands, but this Screamo band does it the right way in most of their songs. This band is so intense. As of now, they have 3 tracks that are on YouTube. A Tagalog song called Law, a song called Eve, and Fool. The thing I've noticed is their song titles that are mostly in 3 letters. But seriously, you should not forget to check this intense post-hardcore band. Link is on the description. The weirdest yet most interesting band have made it at number 5 on this list. If you're a fan of mathcore, atmospheric black metal, and a lot of dystopian cyberpunk movies, put them all together and make it screamo, then we got a band called Limps. An interesting 3-piece band from Mandaluyong, Philippines. Their sound is a mishmash of different genres. As of now, they have 3 records plus 2 EPs and splits. First one is an atmospheric black metal, or in short, black gaze album entitled Body Without. Next is a mathcore album entitled Exquisite Corpse. Here's a little bit of interview from uniteasia.org. The music is so manic. What are the band's influences? The obvious ones are a bunch of old screamo bands like Orchid and Jerome's Dream, grindcore bands like Ed Gain and Full of Hell, but distilled in the weirdness of The Locust, Daughters, and noise rock bands like A Place to Bury Strangers, Girl Band, and Lightning Bolt. We also listen to a lot of electronic stuff. This artist called Machine Girl is where we borrowed our 2-piece setup that uses electronics and backing tracks with live instruments. Is there much of a scene of this type of stuff in the Philippines? Today, there are a few bands that are doing this chaotic sound. Off the Dome, it's HL, DV, Thieves, Conformist, and Beast Jesus. Some other bands are in hiatus. And there should be more that I don't know about yet. But I feel that there is a resurgence in this style. For newer acts, one of Joe's other bands named Dolorosa is to be watched out. Their latest album, Soft Narcosis, is a wild ride. The album explores dystopian cyberpunk themes. Ambitious as it may seem, that's what makes this band so unique and interesting. This band is one of those bands that is never afraid to defy the limitations when it comes to creativity. They always bring something new to the table, and you should definitely check them out. Link down below. Silence doesn't necessarily mean you're out of words. You just choose not to speak. And shouting doesn't always mean you're angry. Sometimes you just want to be heard. Those are the words found on their channel. This band is Noise. Brick City is a straight up post-hardcore band. If you've ever listened to Under Oath, then you probably should dig this band. First time I've listened to their debut, The Bones We Used to Share, I've recognized the early 2000s post-hardcore influence. Bands like Under Oath, From First to Last, or Chiodos would be an exact comparison to describe their sound. And the good thing is, to those who collect vinyl, their debut is now available on vinyl. Brick City has a new track called Chlorine, a single on their up-and-coming album, We the Forgettables. I'm stoked for that album to release soon.
Back all things to hold.
Coming up at number 3 on this list, we got a Screamo band with a taste of jazz. Plane Divides the Sky. They are labeled as emo core and indie rock, but seriously, the jazz undertones in their song suits well with the overall Screamo sound. Here's a little bit of bio from Philippine Band's podcast. They started out playing shows wherever anyone would let them. Through time, their hard work and perseverance have allowed them to build the foundation for music that they could call their own. Unique in their own right, this band works to be solid, intact, and tight. It's quite nebulous where this band will take their music, more so where they will all be in the time to come. Hence, the band still continues to push the envelope of creativity and exploration in their songwriting, never once hesitating to experiment with new sounds, structures, measures, and even instruments. With their independently released debut album, Panic in the Skies in 2003, Plane Divides the Sky hopes to turn heads from listeners everywhere. Although still a relatively young band, they write with intense sincerity and nothing but honest insight. Their music is a cathartic whirlwind of rhythmic melodies and heart-stopping time changes that are unified amongst lulling vocal harmonies and besieging wails. Plane Divides the Sky aims to blur the stereotypes of genres and attract attention, good and bad, from music fans from as far as they can reach. Their sincerity and honesty, alongside their immense passion for music, are things that will drive them to always push for more. It's nice to know that PDTS is now in the process of recording some demos for a new up-and-coming record. I'm stoked to hear that soon. If there's a Screamo band with that charismatic frontman, that would be Miggy Chavez and Chico Sai. Chico Sai, formerly known as Chico Science, is one of the most successful bands here in the Philippines. They've explored a couple of genres all through their career, starting from nu metal or rap metal in the Revenge of the Giant Robot era. But later, they moved to a different path in their later albums. They've explored pop-punk, emo, and post-hardcore. Miggy Chavez and Chico Sai has achieved quite a cult following. Their anthemic song called Vampire Social Club had been the anthem of the Vampira clan here in Masbate. Shout out to all Vampiras. Despite the criticisms on Chavez's vocal quality, it doesn't affect his stage presence, performance, and the overall sound of Chico Sai. In fact, it has been taken as an asset. And that's what makes this band so unique. Chavez's vocals is often described as abysmal, flat, and a bit messy. Chico Sai's studio albums are as follows: in the 2000s, Revenge of the Giant Robot; in 2002, Method of Breathing; Icarus in 2004, Chico Sai, their self-titled, in 2006, in 2009, Fly Black Hearts, and in 2012, This Is Not a Chico Sai Record. lastly, we got the greatest Screamo band of them all. If there's a band that has that great switch from screaming to clean high-pitched singing, that'd be April Morning Skies. Here is their biography from their Facebook page. The group currently consists of lead vocalist Rodrigo Ibanez, bassist Bernard Olazo, drummer Lester Faraon, and guitarist Aaron Corvera and Kenneth Aranza. In 2005, they released a single sampler called Self-Torture is the Best Escape, following a debut full-length album and Darker Days Ahead in 2009. The group is currently signed under Tower of Doom Records, and after a major lineup change, the band is currently releasing their new album Worth Its Weight in Gold. They began 2003. Before April Morning Skies, all members of the band had their own musical projects. Former lead singer Andrew Espiritu, former drummer Mark Estacio, and Aaron Corvera formed the band, which joined by Kenneth Aranza, Bernard Olazo, and original keyboard player Des Sulit. They started by playing covers of post-punk, post-hardcore, and post-indie songs. The band soon wrote original songs and played several live shows. A product of metal, punk, melodic post-hardcore as their influences, AMS aimed to stir music listeners with their own kind of music, concocting tales of triumphs and losses stirred in melodies that are sparked with aggression and punches with enthusiasm. In 2005, Des Sulit left the band and was replaced by Tim Gonzalez. Not long after their initial breakthrough, they hooked Wiz producer Eric Perlas of Tower of Doom and released their demo single titled Self-Torture is the Best Escape. In 2006, the band signed under Tower of Doom Records for their first album release and traveled around the country, joining the 2007 and 2008 Tower of Doom Siege tour alongside with the premier metal/hardcore bands in the country. 2009 to 2011, touring in Darker Days Ahead, gaining an equal amount of onstage experience and road-worthy know-how by immediately embarking on a nationwide tour alongside their label mates in Tower of Doom. They worked even harder on their reputation as being the most exciting band to watch on stage in a few years' time, landing heavyweight festival appearances like the 2007 and 2009 Fete de la Musique, Philippines, and the Pop SummerSlam Forever 2008, opening for metalcore heroes Darkest Hour in front of 30,000 rabid music fans. The same year, the band was tapped again to open for post-hardcore legends Thursday during their Philippine leg of a worldwide tour with Chicosai, Typecast, and Angulo. Subsequently, in 2009, the band released their debut full-length album, In Darker Days Ahead, to a throng of new, excited kids around the country. They headlined their first national tour titled In Darker Days Ahead Summer Album Tour 09. I've stated this on Facebook, but let me just say this once more. If I'm not mistaken, the suffix/term post in a genre such as post-rock, post-punk, post-hardcore is essentially just an era after that particular genre had its peak. Post-hardcore is essentially just a wave of offshoots of hardcore such as emo. Emo is an offspring of hardcore punk that blew up after hardcore punk. It sometimes can be called emotional hardcore. I can see why bands such as The Used and My Chemical Romance, particularly the Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge era, is labeled as post-hardcore when initially it is in the umbrella of emo. Belated Happy National Emo Day to all emos and non-emos alike. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Now if you enjoyed this video, drop a like, comment down for a shoutout, share, follow me on my socials, the link will be down below in the descriptions. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell button for more updates on my upcoming videos. If you want to know more about the music scene here in the Philippines, you can watch my other videos here and here. That's it for this video. I'll see you next time.